All right. Hello, I am Michael Day, Dealer Service Representative here at AGWS, and welcome to our November AGWSU F&I Insights webinar. Today, David Robertson, Executive Director and President of AFIP, and Bob Harkins, Vice President of Training at AGWS, will discuss the three major foci of the CFPB and the FTC, fair lending and dealer participation, the sale of optional voluntary products, and the abolition of arbitration. If you have any questions or comments, please type them in the panel on the right, and we will try to address them as they come in. For follow-up questions, you can email those to bharkins@agws.com. So Bob, if you want to take it away.
Thank you very much, Mike Day. Hello again, everyone. Thank you once again for joining us. And as always, welcome back to F&I Insights, our webinar series program. And this is AGWSU webinar number 27. So we're very pleased with that and response and the feedback that we have from you folks. I'm very pleased to be joining you today, myself, from the 2021 RV Dealers Convention. That's the Recreational Vehicle Dealers Association Convention and Expo. The venue is Paris, not France, but Paris, Las Vegas, a hotel and casino. So that's wrapping up tomorrow. The attendance is really very good, and kind of semi-normalcy is back. I have the opportunity this afternoon. I was talking with Dave Robertson a few minutes ago about to attend a special workshop session, and the title of the workshop that I'm attending, there's four lawyers, and then it's the super lawyers panel, and their topic is how to protect your dealership from lawsuits. So that's it goes in line or ties in line with many of the things that we talk about here at F&I Insights. We'll provide you with information on that in future webinars. So with that, I just want to return now to what Mike said and reintroduce my good friend Dave Robertson, NBA founding member and chairman of AFIP, and for this webinar, our guest host. So Dave, you're on, sir.
Thank you very much, Bob. I can tell you that he's picked some good topics today. They're certainly timely. And as is the case in our webinars, we both will comment. So today we're going to talk about hot topics with regard to the CFPB and the FTC. And the thing we have to keep in mind is that the boss for these organizations is not Donald Trump. So the level of oversight we're going to have on a go-forward basis, at least for the 4 years that we're around in this situation, a lot of oversight on what we do. We're going to talk about two major areas: a fair credit compliance policy and program, which is NADA's excellent guide that was put out to address that. And then we're going to talk also about the NADA program called the Voluntary Protection Products, a model dealership policy. Now, these programs from NADA are well versed in terms of what we have to do, and they're comprehensive. The key point of the program regarding fair credit compliance policy and program had to do with disparate pricing. In other words, what is the markup over the buy rate? Are we making a higher or lower markup over the buy rate based on factors other than the customer's credit worthiness? And of course, as you probably know, there was battles that went back and forth, and finally we came to a resolution, and we're going to talk about then on slide 4 and 5 what became the resolution to this particular problem. So if we can see slides 4 and 5, that would be nice. Here's what we came up with. I mean, there was arguments back and forth. Well, we won't pay the dealers anything. We'll pay them all the same. None of these things seem to work out fair for all parties. We'll talk a little bit about why we have the markup in just a second. So what we hit on, the government did in a consent decree by the Department of Justice, is what we call a dealer participation rate modification form. And on this form, this is what the dealer does when he marks up over the buy rate. The government said, we don't care if you mark up everybody the max, as long as you start everybody at the max. Now, the standard they used was the California Car Buyers Bill of Rights, 250 basis points for terms under 60 months, and 200 basis points for terms over 60 months. And they said, if you start everybody at the same, even though it is the max, that's okay with us. So what we do in this situation then is we take a look at the situation in our store and we say, how then can we modify this situation to get the deal done? So you will see on the form, there are 7 areas in which we can modify downward, not violate the consent decree, but meet the customer's needs and the dealer's needs by getting the car deal done. So in other words, we could look at the situation and say, well, we can't charge the max because dealer participation is limited by the funding source. The one that's most common for us working in F&I is a competitive consideration. To meet a competitive APR quoted to the customer by another funding source. Monthly payment consideration. We just can't hold the full amount and get the deal done so the customer can afford the car. Dealer wants to reduce some inventory. Well, you can maybe make it a little bit more attractive. A promotional campaign offered to all customers on the same dealer participation terms and during that campaign period. We have a program with a subvetted rate. Can cause this to go down. And of course, a dealership incentive program. Now, my form is an AFIP generated form. I think we probably were the second or third person with one. Route 1 digitized ours at one point in time. But everybody has a dealer participation rate modification form. NADA, JM&A, Route 1, dealer track, everybody has one. They're almost all identical because they're all working off the same consent decree. So how do we do this? Customer comes in the store, says, I can go to the Navy Credit Union. And you know what? I know I can beat that rate. So I tell the customer, sir, I would like then to see if I could go after your business. If I could save you some money at the Navy Credit Union. I would check the box for competitive consideration. I would write Navy Credit Union on the form. And I would fill out the form for that customer. Now, you only fill out the form if you deviate downward. So you're not filling out one of these forms on every customer. But anytime you deviate downward from your maximum that you've decided to use in your store relative to the consent decree, then that deal goes through no problem. So we found a high acceptance of this program. We found that it gives the dealer sufficient latitude, but I'll give you a warning. Don't put somebody down there they can go to the credit union unless you can prove they're going to the credit union. So Bob can talk a little bit about what he's finding out in the field when in his training on the dealer participation rate modification form.
Well, some are using it. Majority are still not, although we're making a lot of headways based upon, what's happening in the industry. And we talk about the Foci of the CFPB and the FTC, and one of those 3 things again is fair lending and dealer participation. So I've seen some. Most of them are being marked up 1.5 to 2 points above the buy rate. That doesn't mean that's right or wrong, but I've not seen much above the 2. Although recently there was one at 2.5 or 2.75. I know when Dave, we speak to this when NADA came with this in 2014. Again, these 7 deviations. The great news are all approved by the Department of Justice. So you got a lot of things behind you with using this form. But I think it all comes back again to doing business the right way, and customers thinking about the fact that can I trust you? Are you credible, and do you care? And we're consistent with what we do, and if we're ever challenged. Dave, let me ask you, if I may, on the AFIP modification form compared to the Appendix D of the NADA form, their dealer participation certification form, is almost an exact duplicate. I noticed you've not included the reviewer certification that NADA has in their program, like for 2 days, it's reviewed by someone else. Can you speak to that or talk about that, the pro and con of that, or why that you elected not to have that as part of the
I'm going to get into the oversight portion of fair quality of credit policy. What NADA wants is a little more paperwork to back up what's happening. And so they have a set of forms with their program and a criteria on how can we monitor what these rate modifications are. For it's one thing to mark them down, it's another, what's the pattern of practice? Is it being properly applied? So as a catch-all for NADA, and I'm working another program with NADA, this is a common situation with them. They want more documentation than just the fact that we're doing it in the store. I can tell you in practice, and NADA policy is a good one. I'm telling you, you should follow it. The heavy emphasis right now on getting it done so we can at least protect ourselves on the front end. I found a lot of dealers that are a little bit lax on doing the documentation on the back end. But I do want to spend a minute, if I could, on why we're marking it up over the buy rate and why we're going to be attacked for this, and we shouldn't be. When somebody makes a loan, there are three expenses that come into play. We have a financial obligation origination expense. Somebody has to put the loan on the books. We have an expense of providing customer service and collecting the monthly payments. Who's going to administer the loan? And we have an expense on getting the money to lend. So no matter if you go to a bank or credit union, they do all three of those. They originate the transaction, fill out the paperwork, they collect the monthly payments, and they come up with the money to pay the dealer off. When a customer finances in a dealership, it is the dealership employee that incurs the financial obligation origination expense. You have a place from which to run business. You have to advertise to get people in that business. You have to have a qualified person there to solicit the customer's business. He has to negotiate terms suitable to the dealer, the customer, and the finance source. He has to draft the paperwork, disclose the paperwork, disseminate the paperwork. The dealer incurs the financial obligation origination expense on behalf of ever who accepts assignment of the contract. And so when we talk about the difference between the wholesale rate and retail rate in the store, that isn't extra dealer profit. You're getting reimbursed for putting that financial obligation on the books for whoever accepted assignment of that. Now, in all of these processes, this is free enterprise, there's an element of profit. That this isn't hidden profit. It's not something we're taking away from the consumer. We're just getting reimbursed for putting that financial obligation on the books. Bob, do you have any other comments on the dealer participation rate modification form?
Yeah, let's stay with that with just with one more thing, because I see it in the field as well, especially now we've got so many stores, and the trend I think is not going to go away of the F&I manager position being changed or replaced by variable operations managers, and that's the person who continues or completes the sale of the vehicle, and then they're also into the optional voluntary protection products as well. So it's great to be able to reduce the paper workflow with them, especially, and maybe not have that review or certification if the dealer and his attorney agrees to that. But if we play this out, there's always a question or an area of confusion, and it's going to vary a little bit, I think, based upon just how the deal goes down. But you tie this into, let's say you have a buy rate of 5%, and we set a pre-established dealer participation rate of 2. So again, I'm going to start that deal at a 7% APR, and then I hearken back, not to you must leave my last name, but hearken back to the 7 deadly sins of F&I, and the customer comes back and says, well, hey, wait a minute, is that the best you can do? Is that your best rate? So I come back and talk about what we talk about with the 7 deadly sins. Great question, folks. Thank you for asking. Certainly appreciate your concern for your budget and the cost of credit, especially these days. Again, if you wish to finance here, at Harkins Honda, the annual percentage rate would be 7%. Now, at that point in time, the customer comes back and says, well, I've got this thing all ready to go and approval with, pick a competitor, maybe Federal Credit Union or whatever it is, and they're going to give me 5.5. So now I'm considering dropping from 7 to 5.5 with my documentation. And I always kind of let them determine, because I don't want my words out there, I'm not trying to clone anybody, what the verbiage is after that. after the customer says that, after you come out with a 7, and how you now drop that from 7 to 5.5, and kind of talk about the program. Do you have any more thoughts on that, Dave?
Well, you know what? It could be two things. It could be payment consideration, and then it can be competitive, but it comes down to a competitive situation. So you have to, if somebody says I can do better than you, or I can make my rate better, then I'm going to make sure I say, well, on a competitive situation, I can drop it another so many basis points or whatever. So we're a little bit constricted in one end on the negotiations, but we got to make sure that we're staying close to the outlines of what the government has set for us on the other.
Yeah.
But we
So we're
found
still starting out. Yeah,
no
we're still
problem.
starting out with finance here. This is the rate that's available, and then drop from there. Yeah.
We have thousands of these things out. We have as long as they follow, as long as you document it. We have trouble with documentation. That sword cuts both ways. As long as you've documented it correctly, and if you use the NADA thing, you have more documentation than what we push. But NADA is a good program. It's more thorough than what most programs are. Obviously, they have the dealer's best interest at heart.
Yeah, documentation beats conversation, and you've got that in the deal files. That's about my only comment with the rate modification form. Dave, go ahead, sir.
Well, you know what? I mean, we have people that, it's a hidden profit, and Elizabeth Warren said consumers lose millions of dollars, billions of dollars a year and whatever. They don't like financing in the dealership. But now I'm going to talk about what they hate, the regulators. And now we're going to talk about the voluntary protection products, a model dealership policy, starting with slide 6.
Hey, Dave, before you get to that, I want to just a comment about your user guide and your availability. You have those available for your clients, right?
Yes, anybody that wants the NADA guide can contact us. We'll give that information at the end. Okay. All right, how about a slide 6? All right, the latest iteration is the NADA, NAMAD, and AIADA, Voluntary Protection Products, a model dealership policy. And this is a highly comprehensive program to put once and for all a well-organized, defensible program in place as it relates to voluntary protection products, which we know as aftermarket products. So it's an 18-page guide that covers every area of aftermarket product sales. Let's take a look at slide number 7. One of the requirements of this form is that the dealer post at a place the consumer can see what his policy is regarding value-added products. This dealership offers vehicle service contracts and other voluntary products that are designed to protect your investment in your vehicle you purchase or lease from us. The purchase of any of these voluntary products is completely optional and is not required to purchase or lease a vehicle or obtain a warranty, coverage, financing on a particular terms, or any other product or service offered by the dealership. This dealership is fully committed to providing you the price, terms, and conditions of each voluntary protection product before you decide to purchase it. And it is a requirement of the form. Now, these are slides that we give away. You could put it in a big sign in the showroom floor. We're trying to stay away from that. We have this size here. It's a desk size slide that we give away that you can put on somewhere in the F&I office on the wall or on a desk. But it's NADA telling the consumer these products have value, but they're optional, and you're not required in any form relating to the purchase to buy any aftermarket products. And so the first thing NADA requires is that you post this sign. Let's go to the next slide, please. Let's see how thorough this program is. Number one, we have to have the policy statement. That's what we just talked about. Number two, we have to have legal compliance, training, coordination, and document retention. Now, we're not just talking about, well, let's see, we can work this out. We're talking about well-documented, fully vetted legally procedures. They're going to have to set standards with regard to product selection. Have we done diligence on this product? Is there a bona fide benefit to that consumer? Pricing is a big issue. How are we pricing these products? We've got to stay away from antitrust, but we're working very diligently on developing models to ensure that the pricing is acceptable both to the consumer and the dealer. A lot on advertising. What are the things you can do in an advertising to make sure that you don't misrepresent your aftermarket products, voluntary protection products to the consumer? Product presentation and sale. What are the standards we're going to have in the F&I office to make sure then that we do everything we're supposed to do? So we're going to have to have written policy and proof of training and proof of adherence on everything. Product cancellation, a huge one in aftermarket products. If dealers get caught in a catch-22, it's everybody who made money when the product went out the door has to give back a portion of that money when the product is canceled early. And the hallmark of the government in all their programs today is how do we handle customer complaints in a fully documented and organized manner. Bob, why don't you speak a little bit about what you're doing on these areas in your training in the stores today?
Okay, just want to remind everybody that both of these programs that we referenced, the first one, the Fair Credit Compliance Policy Program, and this one that Dave is into big time now, what I call the Model Dealership Policy for Voluntary Protection Products, both are authored by NADA's Paul Mitri. Quote Paul a lot. Paul, of course, is NADA's VP of Regulatory Affairs, also Chief Counsel for Financial Services. This one, Dave, I'll tell you, since let's just say that the beginning of the year, the new administration, the three major foci, what the CFPB and FTC have announced, been spending much more time with this as opposed to on the Fair Credit Compliance Policy and Program. So would remind you, folks that have the booklet, the pages, you can go online and get those if you're a native member, but the hard copy is a great piece to have. But, it's 18 total pages that Dave made reference to. But don't be overwhelmed by that, because the physical layout of the policy, which is the meat, is really just 2 pages along with 2 appendices. So you got pages 15, 16, 17, and 18. And what Dave read to you earlier, that voluntary protection products policy with the native program is part of page 17. I had the opportunity to, and I know some of you that are on with us today were at Agent Summit a few months back at the Bellagio here in Vegas, and I had the pleasure of again being the MC moderator for that, and introduced Paul Mitri as the keynote speaker right after lunch the first day, and spoke for about an hour and a half, really on both of these programs. But he really talked about the fact, among other things, that words matter, especially from an NADA standpoint. If you're talking to Congress, you're talking to a congressional group or subcommittee. Maybe you're talking to somebody with the CFPB or FTC. I know Paul said that he's already spoken one-on-one with both Rohit Chopra, who at the time was not yet confirmed as director of the CFPB, but now he is. And he's also talked with Rebecca Kelly Slaughter. I love that name, from one of the 5 commissioners from the Federal Trade Commission. But, at my age and at any age, it's hard to break habits of terms that we've used for years, if not decades. And when we go to the fair lending and the reserve, what Dave and I've talked about before, but really what Paul Mitri echoed that day, is we want to eliminate terms like finance reserve, rate spread, dealer markup, dealer profit, or dealer fee. And I've used the term finance reserves since I got in the business back in the 70s. But the recommendation that he said to use is referred to it as dealer participation. They can explain that, they can better defend it, whatever, and that's really what it is. It's dealer participation. And when you think about that, if you look at any of your retail installment sale contracts, it says the annual percentage rate may be negotiable with the seller, but right after that, it says the seller may assign this contract and retain its right to receive a part, keyword is part, a part of the finance charge. So referring to a recommendation from NADA's Paul Mitri as dealer participation. And then when it gets to voluntary protection products, optional voluntary protection products, had discussions with a number of people about this yesterday at our booth at our BTA and also some at our reception last night at Jimmy Buffett's Margaritaville, which was quite an evening, by the way. But the recommendation from NADA's Paul Mitri is to eliminate terms from a product standpoint like add-ons, like ancillaries, like F&I products, like back-end products. And Dave, as you know, there's many other terms that can be thrown in there, but I just heard a lot just being out here for a day and a half, I guess now, is add-ons and ancillaries are all over the place. And again, the NADA recommendation is to refer to them as optional voluntary protection products. But we've been promoting at the American Guardian Group of companies with our agent partners and dealer clients, both of these programs since inception. The Fair Credit Compliance going back to 2014, and then this most recent one in 2019. So we're making some headway with that. But it takes some role play. It takes some practice. And we talk about the 20 words as an example to use when you introduce the menu. Mr. Customer, here's a menu breakdown of your optional voluntary protection products that are available to protect your credit and your investment. We know it works. It's low key, it's downstream, and it's non-confrontational. Just another couple of words with that, and Dave, you may yet cover this. Talking about the prices charged. I want to go back to the 7 deadly sins of F&I, the AFIP publication, and number 7 in that handout, in that piece, is excessive buy rate and aftermarket product markup. So the AFIP recommendation in that piece, in part, and I quote, the retail price charged for aftermarket products must be commensurate with value received by the customer. Of course, commensurate means proportionate. So that's how it's addressed in that program. We have, and I pretty much end up every webinar by talking about our American Guardian Group of companies seller code of conduct for retail sales, which serves as a guide to the proper sales practices for all retail sellers of our products. And when it comes to a rate administration, dealer participation, the only thing that we're currently saying about that, we're not getting into dollar amounts or percent markups over cost, whatever, but in part the bullet point that talks about that topic says, and I quote, seller should be cognizant of limits on coverage within the program and ensure the retail rate charged is reasonable. So we're using the keyword of reasonable. AFIP 7 Deadly Sins has the word commensurate, reasonable in comparison to the potential benefits within the product. So when we first came out with this seller code of conduct for retail sales, which goes back to June of 17, with certain terms, I just went to the dictionary, looked them up, and made sure that I knew what the heck they mean as well. But reasonable is defined as fair, just, sensible, and not excessive. Reasonable, fair, just, sensible, and not excessive. So Dave, there's more I can say on the presentation itself, whatever, if we have time that kind of gets into that after the menu introduction. But I want to go back to you to continue this, to either comment on what I said or move on to our next point. Go ahead, sir.
Well, AGWS, I can tell you, has been an industry leader in this, but here's our problem. Here's the catch-22. Value, like beauty, is in the eyes of the beholder. And we have two standards on what's a reasonable price for a value-added product. The first one is from the buyer's perspective. And the buyer asks himself, at the risk that I'm facing and the amount of money I have in the bank, for me covering that risk, if I have to pay it, depends on my decision if I should do a value-added product purchase. Now, we live in a shared risk culture. Instead of one guy putting $100 away in case his car breaks, 10 people each put $10 away, because actuarially one of them is going to have a claim. So when we get down to pricing as what's a fair price to the consumer, it's relative to the consumer's individual financial worthiness. Can I really afford a $4,000 transmission job when I got $600 in savings? But it's a $4,000 transmission job, excuse me. So the standard from the customer's standpoint is a personal one. What is the value to me to pay this dollar amount for that particular product? Unfortunately, there's a second level of oversight on what constitutes a fair price for that product. And that's the one the regulators are going to look at. And here's that standard. Is the price paid for that product, the retail price, plus the cost of financing that product in that agreement, commensurate with the value received? But now we're going to get into the frequency of claims and the dollar amount of claims. Now we're on an actuarial review of these programs. So we know that we're collecting so much. We know how many people have a failure, the frequency, and we know about the loss cost per person who files a claim.
So Dave, you're saying that's where the regulators are going now with that?
That will be the standard they're going to look at. They don't care that, I mean, the consumer thing is a consideration. The hard monies and hard data is going to come down to, can we justify actuarially in a fair sense of commerce the frequency, the risk that customer really has, and what's the average cost to the customer, in fact, if there is a claim. So we're going to have to take a look at this from both sides, because you have two sets of eyes looking at this. Unfortunately, they don't have the same type of vision. One's farsighted, one's nearsighted, if you want to look at it that way. So the big argument is going to come about then as to what is a fair price on these products. Let me give you the simple answer. If you've had products that you sold a whole bunch of, maybe gingerbread products or ancillary products, and you can't remember when the last time it was you ever had a claim on that product, you need to take a look at that product. Because if you're tested on it, you can't come up with a plausible reason as to why you should sell it that's fair to the consumer. I'm not telling you how to run your business. Now, you can take some gingerbread or peripheral products and put them into a package. There's a lot of things you can do. But you have to be mindful, looking back as to what the real performance of these products are, as to what constitutes a fair price for the value received. And so that's going to be the major question on this program. Now, this is not simple stuff. But NADA has been working with Dave Robertson, little old me, have been working with Paul Mitri to create a program similar to some of the programs that AFIP has put out so far. Obviously, we've been in the certification business since 1989, but we've been in the red flags and safeguard business since 2003. And so what we're working with NADA on is a full-blown program that will probably take a month to install it, where we go into a dealership electronically in a number of sessions, 10 and 1.5 hour sessions, and work with the appointed personnel to put into that store a program that's fully compliant with the voluntary protection products model dealership policy. It is their policy. And when we have the policy written for that particular store, relative to the program, we send it off to an attorney, a qualified attorney, who will coordinate with that dealer management to, at some point, come back and say, I can say that this program meets the requisites of the voluntary protection product program. That we have looked at everything. This is what we think is a reasonable exception, a reasonable example of how we should handle this particular product in all of those 8 situations: pricing, claims, whatever. So we hope to launch this program before the end of the year. Certainly have some positive cases in place before NADA. I'll be with Paul at the end of this month. This is the most massive program I've ever done in my entire career. But I'll tell you, it is one that has grave consequences for our industry. But common sense rules here. If we do the right thing, we can make it work. First thing we need to do is make sure the dealer has all the documents, they're properly executed. The old joke is a dealer doesn't know what the program has in it till he's on his way to his lawyer's office with one copy in his hands and he's never signed it. So we're talking about dotting I's and crossing T's at a high level, but at an operational level, down to what you people are doing in your store, trying to talk that customer into buying that product. We want to give you the tools to do a good job, to do that. But on the other hand, we want to make sure that what we're doing is compliant in the mind of the regulators, the consumers, the dealers, and the vendors, that somehow it meets the standards for everybody. The last thing we want to talk about in slide 9 is the abolition of arbitration. We want to get rid of it.
Before we do that, and I know we're coming to a close, but back with this sounds tremendous, the things that you're doing and working with and really advancing, I think, the NADA program. But obviously, it'd still be a must, would be like their appendix, what is it, B, with the Voluntary Protection Product Certification Form and setting a standard retail price for every product, and then obviously the selling price, and then going down based upon allowable discounts. Am I correct in that thinking?
Yes.
Okay.
But I tell you, Bob, of all the programs you and I have worked on over the years, this is by far two things, the most complicated and the one with the greatest long-term impact on our industry.
Then when does the dealer bring in his own attorney house counsel? Very early in this, or until they've been through this program? Well,
here's what we're finding from the dealers. I mean, it's like saying we're going to go up Mount Everest administratively. How can we do it by not taking the rest of our life going up Mount Everest in a positive way? The one thing that I've been doing is drilling this down to safeguards, red flags, drilling it down to simple tasks by people who were charged with those tasks. We've talked about this for years. So we're breaking it down into workable units and then putting it together in a way that doesn't take forever to do it or a genius to apply it. All right, let's talk a little bit about the effort to get rid of arbitration. I'll tell you, if there ever was a double-edged sword, I guess it would be arbitration. On one hand, it gives somebody a ready way to solve their grievances in certain situations. On the other hand, in other situations, it inhibits their right to pursue regress in certain situations. So if it's a peripheral thing, we can sit down, it's a misunderstanding or whatever, that's one thing. But when we get into situations where maybe a dealer has committed a fraudulent act, but we're bound by the binding arbitration clause, we don't have access to get redress under that particular situation. So the battle then is going to be, can we in fact have binding arbitration? I will tell you, the dealers fought binding arbitration in some of their discussions with the manufacturers, so they lose a little bit of steam there. Personally, I think a non-legal recourse built into the situation method of resolving the majority of disputes is a good thing. Either arbitration or mediation. I've done both. And it's simple. Like, there was a misunderstanding. I can tell you 80% of the ones that I've worked, a simple explanation by the F&I manager, the sales manager, or somebody giving an inch to the customer would have eliminated the problem. So personally, I'm in favor of arbitration. Binding arbitration, I said, has its limitations on certain situations. So maybe we take and define further what constitutes something acceptable for binding arbitration. Bob, what are your thoughts?
That's good. I jotted some things down with respect to that, and pretty much the same thing that you said. But my notes are really, number one, that dealers should revisit the arbitration provisions in their documents and do that by talking to their attorney, their house counsel, made reference to the fact that the language needs to be consistent in their consumer documents, consumer-facing documents, buyer's orders, retail installment sale contracts, etc. And then from someone else, another source that I picked up, one of our attorney friends, is that secondly, the arbitration language needs to be, and this which should be common sense, fair for both the dealer and the consumer. You talk about the back and forth with that, but the bottom line is that one-sided arbitration provisions may fail to be enforced. So I pulled a retail installment sale contract from the great state of Texas, the rentals contract dated April of 21. This is their most recent one. And they get longer and longer. This is now 28 inches long, although Reynolds is coming with shorter versions with this, primarily when the agreement expires with their dealer customers, and to kind of shorten these forms. But anyhow, on the Texas arbitration agreement for the retail installment sale contract, on the face, which is right below the other charges and return check charge, whatever, there's a section that says, and I quote, agreement to arbitrate. And it says, it's very short, by signing below, you agree that pursuant to the arbitration provision on the reverse side of this document, the reverse side of this contract, not document, you or we may elect to resolve any dispute by neutral binding arbitration and not by a court action. And then the last sentence says, see the arbitration provision for additional information concerning the agreement to arbitrate. And then there's a space the buyer signs, the co-buyer signs, and that's, again, on the middle of the retail installment sale contract. You go to the back of the contract, and on this particular one, and probably most of the rentals that have the arbitration provision, it's on the back down at the bottom, and it's right below the holder in due course notice. So holder in due course is right above that, holder in due course rule, then the arbitration provision. But it's very long, it's very lengthy, a bit of legalese, and it's very, very comprehensive. So, we talked about the give before show and give the customer the copy of the contract before disclosure, but we need to go back to some of the basics of just training on not only the front of the retail installment sale contract, but also what's on the back of the retail installment sale contract as well, especially in light of the number of things that Dave has shared with us today. What else, Dave, would you say with respect to arbitration agreements?
Incidentally, the holder in due course rule will be argued before the Supreme Court. That's up for viewing by the court. All right, Bob, do we have time for questions from our listeners today?
Next year, we think, on holder in due course, it'll be before the court.
What's being contested in holder in due course is the most amount of money the customer can get is only what the customer paid. And they say that's restrictive on redress by the part of the customer.
Mm-hmm. Okay, go ahead, Dave, with whatever else you have. But if not, we can go to the profitability focus, which is how we normally close out. But we've got some time if you want to share some other things.
I wanted to leave time if somebody had something they want to discuss.
Do we have any feedback?
So far, no questions.
Well, either we did a really good job or a really bad job if we have no questions.
The good news and the bad news, right? Well, then I guess I'll just say next slide, right? And is that up, the 2021 F&I profitability focus, Mike?
Correct, yep.
Okay. I just say that when you think about it, that, our goal, our challenge, our opportunity, and really our job responsibility is to focus on, commit to, and assess our profit opportunity in our related organizations, whether that be, the agent client profitability or dealer client as well. From a focus standpoint, and what I've just covered in a lot of stores, and I would say to you from a basic or foundation standpoint, our focus needs to change as it relates to how we're presenting our optional voluntary protection products. And rather than saying or thinking, as we've always done in so many stores for many years, we have the thought process that we have all these products. How can we sell them to our customers and approach the presentation that way? We're finding and have found for some time that a better approach from a focus standpoint is to maybe say, we have all these customers. How can our products help them as far as protecting their credit and investment and other things that Dave touched on today? So maybe that focus needs to be changed in a number of our stores. Next, as it relates to commitment, we talked about the commitment to do business the right way. And for a number of years now, with different groups that I've represented and worked for, we've talked about developing a base statement or dealership value statement. And I still endorse, and we have it in place in a lot of stores, is the acronym for conducting business the right way. We spell right, R-H-I-T-T. R stands for respect, H stands for honesty, I stands for integrity, the first T stands for transparency, the second T stands for trust. Now, if you're in a really a time bind, you want to short that, whatever, I know a lot of stores have done just that, and they really kind of refer to it now as the HIT principle, and they're committed from a standpoint of business practices, the three things, the HIT principle, which is honesty, integrity, and transparency. Transparency meaning things are clearly seen and easily understood, and if that's evident, then I think that the trust will take care of itself. But commit to doing business the right way. We also talk about that, and a lot of our training, and I just love doing this in stores, is commit yourself to the F&I four-way stop. And think about it, especially in light of today's customers, digital retail, doing so much online. But stop the fake chit chat, number one. Number two, stop the phony surveys, and they are phony. Number three, stop the mindless, endless questioning of customers that comes across as an interrogation, which is bad enough. But worse than that, it comes across as, and that interrogation now becomes combative conversation. You're done. So why fall into those traps? So stop the fake chit chat, stop the phony surveys, stop the mindless, endless questioning of customers, and then last but certainly not least, stop forcing customers to wait in a lobby or lounge area, whatever, while you're completing the paperwork in advance and putting together, as many people say, the magic menu that's just right for this customer. From a CSI standpoint, doing business the right way, honesty, integrity, transparency, and bring the customer in and complete that menu process with them. Then assess, I think, is a personal thing, and that is assess the quality of your own personal presentation as it relates to presenting your optional voluntary protection products and also the rate administration program for dealer participation that you have in your store. So, I mean, what's your personal preference? How are you trained? How are you successful? Whatever. Is it still mostly monologue, one-way communication? If it is, you might want to take a second look at that and get an honest opinion and convert yourself to a dialogue presentation of two-way communication. So monologue, dialogue, get the customer involved, and then ultimately conversational selling to get the customer even more involved with the impact benefit statements that we teach, that many of you know about in our F&I training, but also impact benefit questions as well to get the customer involved early on, and then to really be able to pull it off. We did a webinar or two a while back with my good friend Ed Stewart on Audible Ready solutions, and I think that's a model that many of you can look at and to maybe take some information from that as well to maximize the profitability in your store, but do it the right way. Wrapping it up before I get back to the mic to close it out. As always, we talk about the need to develop a mission statement in your store. The one that we recommend is one from a large dealer group, goes back a number of years, but think about what this says when it relates to product sales. Every customer knows what they're getting. They agree to buy it. They know why they need it, and they feel good about it when they leave the dealership. So, man, if that's happening with our customers, that's an excellent thing. And then also to develop your internal, whether you're an agent, one of our agent partners or dealer clients, whatever, a value statement for your organization. So I share with you and share everywhere that I go the American Guardian Warranty Services University training value statement, which very simply is, we endorse and teach. We endorse and teach the industry standards and best practices that are recommended by NADA, by AFIP, as we did today, and finally, our American Guardian Warranty Services Seller Code of Conduct for Retail Sales, which serves as a guide to the proper sales practices for all retail sellers of AGWS products. Again, the bottom line, our goal is, objective is to help you maximize deal profit, both front-end gross and finance and insurance income, but as always, to do it the right way, and the right way is in a manner consistent with good customer relations and sound business practices. Before I yield back to Mike Day to close this out, I want to again give a great thank you, Dave, for your taking time out today. I know you have a lot of things going on. Great job with this information. There's some new stuff that we all have to consider and then do it again the right way. And what a great start it is to have some of this information passed along with the people that were able to join us today. But even if they don't, I mean, these things are recorded, and a number of the things we've done together since 2019, our people are going in, they're reviewing them, they're asking for slide presentations, whatever, and we can always get that to them through our marketing source. So once again, Dave, thanks for a great job. Let me
close with this. 80% of the complaints that the government gets comes from 20% of the dealers. Here's the problem. The laws that they pass relative to that 20% of the dealers apply to 100% of us. That's the downside of bad practices and regulation.
Say that again one more time, please.
80% of the complaints the government gets are generated by 20% of the dealers.
Okay.
The laws they pass to address what the 20% of the dealers are doing are applied to 100% of the dealers. Most of the laws we deal with are based on worst case scenarios on stuff we never did.
Yep. Very good, Dave. Thank you. Michael Day, bring us home, sir.
Thank you much.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Dave. Thank you, Bob, for the great information. Take a look. This is going to be our last F&I Insights webinar for the year, December 8th, before we start a fresh webinar series next year for 2022. And as always, here are the previous ones. Take a look, agws.com/webinars, and then like and follow us on LinkedIn. Appreciate it. Thank you.